Before we dive into today's unsolved cases, I want to share a story that reminds us justice can still come, even decades later. In 2001, 50-year-old Leslie Jennings Preer was brutally murdered in her Chevy Chase, Maryland home. For over 2 decades, her case remained unsolved. Her husband, Sandy, died without ever knowing who killed his wife. Her daughter, Lauren, lived with heartbreak and unanswered questions. Thanks to new DNA technology and the power of forensic genealogy, detectives finally identified Leslie's killer, Eugene Gligor, a man who once dated her daughter and was considered part of the family. He had even gone on beach vacations with them. No one ever imagined he could be capable of something so horrific, but a tiny trace of DNA preserved at the scene and submitted to Othram unlocked the truth. Investigators tracked Gligor down, matched his DNA, and in June 2024, he was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. He finally pled guilty in May 2025, and his sentencing hearing is set for August 28, 2025 at 9 a.m. He faces a maximum of 30 years in prison for the second-degree murder conviction. It's anticipated that several of Leslie's siblings will testify at the hearing. Leslie's daughter said she never suspected him, but justice came anyway, and that's the point I want to make. Even when a case goes cold, even when decades pass, it doesn't mean the truth is gone forever. New tools, new science, new resolve. These are helping families get answers they never thought they'd receive. So, if you're watching this and your loved one's case is still unsolved, don't lose hope. Justice can come. And as Leslie Preer's case shows us, it sometimes arrives when we least expect it. Joan Ann Charlton was just 19 years old when her life was stolen. She was the youngest of 5 siblings in a Jamaican family who'd moved to Baltimore in the early 1970s, chasing a better life. Joan stood out for being warm, outspoken, and full of life. She loved children, books, and reggae music. She was also a trailblazer, the first in her family to leave home for college. She graduated valedictorian from Eastern High School in Baltimore. She tutored other students in math and had a natural gift for technology. In the fall of 1983, she accepted an offer from Frostburg State College, located in the quiet mountains of western Maryland. She planned to study computer science and someday work in systems analytics. But just weeks into her freshman year, everything changed. In the early hours of Sunday, September 11, 1983, Joan went to a party in Annapolis Hall with friends. Around 5:30 a.m., she left, reportedly to do laundry. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. When Joan didn't show up for class the next day, her counselor called her family. Her roommate reported her missing. A search was launched, and 2 days after she vanished, searchers made a heartbreaking discovery. Joan's body was found nude and stabbed multiple times in a secluded wooded area near a creek on campus. Her laundry bag and one of her slippers were found nearby, and to this day, one critical piece of the puzzle remains locked away. Joan's autopsy report has never been made public. The Maryland Medical Examiner's Office has allegedly refused to release the report, even decades later. That silence has left many painful questions unanswered, especially whether Joan was sexually assaulted. Given the condition in which she was found, it's a possibility that's long been suspected, but without official confirmation, it remains unclear. The lack of access to such a key document has only deepened the frustration for her loved ones, and for those who've tried to bring renewed attention to her case. Searchers later described how Joan's body had been partially covered in leaves, hidden, almost as if someone wanted her forgotten. It had been raining heavily, and investigators believe the weather may have washed away critical evidence. The crime rocked Frostburg, a young woman, bright, kind, respectful, murdered just weeks after starting school, and somehow no one saw anything. From the start, there were troubling signs. Joan had told her family she wasn't getting along with her roommate and had planned to move dorms that weekend. She'd promised to call home on Monday with her new number. That call never came. Police said they had suspects. A man was questioned. His home was searched. No charges were filed. At one point, investigators even chased a rumor involving an unregistered game of Dungeons and Dragons. Another witness claimed they'd heard Joan crying around 3:30 a.m., saying, "Just tell him to leave me alone," but none of it led anywhere. The details of Joan's case remain as murky as the rain-soaked woods where she was found. At Joan's funeral, a tall, heavy-set man, someone none of the family recognized, collapsed at her casket, sobbing uncontrollably. His mother had to pull him away. To this day, no one knows who he was. The case is still open. Records remain sealed, and many current students at Frostburg don't even know her name, but that may finally be changing. In recent years, students from Frostburg and West Virginia University studying journalism and forensic science have revisited Joan's story. They've pored over old articles, interviewed her family, and tried to reconstruct that weekend. Her family believes that if sharing Joan's story can help someone else, even though it didn't help her, then it's worth telling. And if you know something, anything at all, now is the time to speak up. If you have any information, no matter how small, please contact the Maryland State Police Homicide Unit at 410-290-0050 or submit an anonymous tip to metrocrimestoppers.org. Kathy Lynn Beatty was born on July 8, 1960, to Knox and Pat Beatty in Silver Spring, Maryland. Her parents were raising Kathy and her older sister, Teresa, in a quiet Montgomery County neighborhood on Frankfort Drive in Aspen Hill. By the summer of 1975, Kathy was 15, bright, sweet, and full of life. She loved dancing, tap, ballet, jazz, and was known for her shy smile. Friends say she was quiet, respectful, and still the kind of teen who followed her mom's rule of being home before dark. But one summer night, everything changed. It was July 24th. Kathy had spent most of the day inside watching TV. Around 4 p.m., she asked her mom if she could go out and ride her bike. Pat said yes, but reminded her to be home before nightfall. Pat was heading to Baltimore with a friend for a Maryland lottery event and planned to be home by 9. Kathy didn't want to go. She told her mom she'd ride around a bit, make herself some dinner, and stay close. They said goodbye. It was the last time Pat Beatty saw her daughter alive. Around 6:30 or 7, a neighbor boy came by to give Kathy a souvenir shirt from Ocean City. They chatted for a few minutes. Then, sometime around 8:30, several kids said they saw Kathy walking near Parkland Junior High, a popular hangout for teens back then. Just beyond that school, behind the nearby Kmart, was a spot known as The Rocks, a place where teens sometimes snuck off to drink or smoke. Several kids claimed they saw her that night, but none of them said they were with her. That night, a summer storm rolled in, thunder, lightning, and heavy rain. Pat got home later than planned, closer to 11 than 9. The house was dark, and immediately she felt it. Something was wrong. She turned on the lights and found a note from Kathy. It said she'd gone to her friend Sue's house and would be back by 10. But when Pat called over, she learned Kathy had never been there at all. The kids had lied to cover for her. Panic set in. Pat started calling everyone she could think of. One of her last hopes, a boy Kathy had a crush on. They'd been 8th grade sweethearts. The boy's father said the boys were supposed to be sleeping outside in a camper, but when he checked, they were gone. Pat drove the neighborhood. She passed Parkland, circled the Kmart, anywhere Kathy might have gone. At one point, she flagged down a police officer and begged him to check the woods behind Kmart. He told her to go home, call it in, wait. She did. Morning came, but still no Kathy. That's when Teresa, Kathy's sister, and her boyfriend decided to check the hill behind Kmart. As they neared the spot called The Rocks by local teens, they saw something. It was Kathy. She was lying in a drainage ditch, barely alive. Her skull had been crushed. Her pants were gone. Her purse was nearby, and next to her body was a set of keys, keys that didn't belong to her. One of them was later identified as a General Motors car key. Kathy was rushed to Suburban Hospital. She underwent emergency surgery, but never woke up. For 11 long days, her family waited by her side, hoping, praying. On August 5, 1975, Kathy Lynn Beatty died from her injuries. She was just 15 years old. The investigation started right away, but it was never easy. The crime scene was a wooded, trash-filled lot behind the Kmart. Today, it's all gone, replaced by pavement and townhomes. Any evidence that might have been there is lost to time. Police interviewed hundreds of people. Some teens lied, others refused to talk. A few were suspected, but no one was ever arrested. Then, in 1987, a new name emerged, Fred Howard Coffey Jr. Coffey was a known child molester, and by then a convicted killer. In the summer of '75, he worked at Vitro Corp., a government contractor in Aspen Hill, just blocks from Kathy's home. He started on April 24th and suddenly quit on July 31st, right after Kathy's attack. No warning, no goodbye, just a letter demanding his final paycheck and a lie. He claimed his wife and daughter had been in a car accident, but that wasn't true. Coffey was staying at a motel in Gaithersburg, just a short drive from where Kathy was found. Detectives tried to link him to the keys found at the scene. They dug into DMV records, followed leads on vehicles, but by the time they were closing in, many of those records had been destroyed. No charges were ever filed, but Coffey's never been cleared either. Still, others believe the truth may lie closer to home. Detective Wayne Brown once said he didn't believe Kathy's death was premeditated, that maybe she ran, maybe she fell, maybe someone panicked. The report said that Kathy had been sexually assaulted but not penetrated, and she was barefoot, something her family says would have been unthinkable for her in that area. Glass, trash, sharp rocks. She wouldn't have gone there alone. Could she have been lured? Followed? Was it someone she trusted? For decades, that question has haunted her family. Kathy's bedroom stayed untouched for years. Her mother, Pat, never stopped hoping, never stopped waiting for justice, and someone out there still knows what happened. As of today, the reward for information stands at over $20,000. If you know anything, please call the Montgomery County Police Cold Case Unit at 240-773-5070. You can remain anonymous. Kathy Lynn Beatty deserves justice. On April 23, 1985, construction crews were clearing land in Glen, Burnie, Maryland, for what would become the Marley Station Mall. The crew would never be the same when they stumbled upon a rusted metal trash can buried in a wooded patch near the site. Inside were human remains. A young man, white, around 5 foot 8 inches to 5 foot 11 inches, slim build, brown hair. He wore a blue and black crewneck sweater, cuffed slacks with adjustable buttons, and black leather lace-up shoes. The medical examiner determined he'd died from severe trauma to the upper body. It was murder. 7 coins were found in his pockets. The newest one was minted in 1963, but nobody knew who he was. Detectives pulled every thread they could find. They consulted forensic experts, checked dental records, created sketches. They even called in the Smithsonian, but nothing led to a name. There were no missing persons report that matched, no fingerprints, no family calling to say that could be him. And for years, the case just sat, but not forgotten. It wasn't until 2019 that the case broke wide open. Detective Regina Collier turned to Parabon Nanolabs. They extracted DNA from the remains and uploaded the profile to public databases. Slowly, a family tree began to take shape. It stretched across states Arizona, Washington, Oregon, West Virginia, and Maryland. And finally, on April 4, 2019, authorities confirmed what no one had known for nearly 6 decades. The young man in the trash can was Roger Hearne Kelso. Roger was born on August 28, 1943, in Fort Wayne, Indiana, but he spent his childhood in Glen, Burnie, on a quiet stretch of Whip Lane. He was one of 10 siblings in a big, loving family, gentle by nature, artistic. At Glen Burnie High, Roger displayed quiet leadership and served as president of the art club. After graduating in 1961, he stuck around town. Then, in the summer of '62, he told his family he was leaving for a while. Everything's good, he said, calm, peaceful. He had books tucked under his arm. His sister, Mary Ellen, watched him walk out the door, choosing not to press him out of respect. He didn't offer details, and she didn't ask. And that was it. Roger was gone. He wasn't forgotten, but year after year, there was no word, no sightings, no calls, and no clues. He wasn't reported missing. When he was identified as an unidentified homicide victim, the news stunned his surviving family. 3 of his sisters, along with nieces, nephews, and grandchildren, gathered at a press conference to finally say his name out loud, to honor him, to acknowledge the loss they'd carried in silence for so long. All these years, Mary Ellen said, and all these people still care. She remembered Roger as sweet and trusting, maybe too trusting. He loved animals, loved children, and there's no way, she said, that he would have left without a word to their mother. When he missed the birth of a new sibling in 1963, they knew something had gone wrong. Police now believe Roger was killed shortly after leaving home, likely sometime in 1962 or 63. The timeline fits the evidence, the coins, the clothing, the trauma. He was just 19 or 20 years old. But the mystery remains. Who did this, and why? Detectives are still investigating, and while it's unclear whether any usable DNA from the killer was recovered, the case is far from closed. Anne Arundel County Police are offering a $10,000 reward for any information leading to an arrest in Roger's case, or any other open homicide in the county. Even Detective John Jashik, the original investigator who responded to the scene back in 1985, came out of retirement for the announcement. There was just nothing there, he said. No evidence, just dirt, brick, and bones. But now there's something. Now there's Roger. His remains will finally be laid to rest at Loudon Park in Baltimore, in a family plot his mother prepared years ago. She passed away 5 years before the identification, but as Mary Ellen said, she knows now. She's with him. Detective Collier continues the work. She's talked to family members across the country, gathering stories. If you knew Roger or someone who did, please contact the Anne Arundel County Police Homicide Unit at 410-222-4731 or leave an anonymous tip at 410-222-4700. Because even the smallest memory, the tiniest detail, might be the key to solving the mystery that's haunted this family for over 60 years. Dorothy VanRoden was born in 1960 to Cindy and Jack VanRoden and grew up in Rosedale, Maryland, alongside her younger brother, Christopher. She was known as a lively, spirited girl who loved music, makeup, and going out with friends. Like so many teenage girls of the 1970s, Dorothy dreamt big. She had a flair for fashion, an easy laugh, and a presence that people remembered. Ronald Garrison, just 3 years older, was a natural athlete, someone who stood out both on and off the field. He was level-headed, dependable, and deeply loyal to those he cared about. People saw a future in him, maybe in sports, maybe something bigger. The two were young, full of life, and deeply intertwined in the Overlay and Middle River community. At some point, they formed a bond. Maybe it was friendship, maybe something more. Whatever it was, they were close, and they were together in their final moments. It's been nearly 5 decades since that moment in Baldwin, Maryland, when everything changed, but the pain still lingers. On the afternoon of January 8, 1978, Baltimore County Police were called to a wooded area near Bottom Road and Church Lane in Hydes. A disturbing discovery had been made. A young man and woman found in a stream bed. Both had been shot with a shotgun. The victims were quickly identified as 20-year-old Ronald Garrison and 17-year-old Dorothy VanRoden, both previously reported missing by worried family members. At the scene, detectives found 2 pillowcase-type linens near their bodies, though it's never been clear what role those played, if any. Dorothy had once been a cheerleader at Overlay High School. Though she had dropped out by 17, she was still a familiar face at the school and in the neighborhood surrounding it. She and Ron were known to hang out at the Kenwood Pool Hall, a local staple in the Kenwood shopping center that drew crowds of teens and young adults throughout the 70s. At the time of the murders, they were reportedly staying with an acquaintance on Ambo Circle in Middle River. Earlier that week, the two had been seen walking through familiar parts of town. One report even placed them near Gunpowder Falls State Park, not far from the Harford County line. But after that, nothing. Whatever happened in those final hours has remained a mystery. Their bodies were found side by side in the freezing water. Police ruled the case a double homicide, but no arrests were made. No one was charged. And all these years later, the case remains open. Over the decades, Dorothy's family was reportedly told that investigators had identified a suspect, someone who had since died in prison. There were even whispers of DNA evidence linking that individual to the crime. But if that's true, no public announcement was ever made, no name released, no formal closure given. Dorothy's parents, Cindy and Jack, both passed away without ever knowing the truth. They died with their grief unanswered, their daughter's name still tied to a file marked Unsolved. Today, Dorothy and Ron's names remain etched in the Baltimore County Unsolved Homicide files. And yet, to those who knew them, they're not just a case number or an old headline. They were kids, bright, ambitious, and taken far too soon. If you lived in the area, if you remember something, anything from that winter in 1978, please speak up. Maybe you were a student at Overlay. Maybe you remember something from Kenwood Pool Hall or saw something strange on Bottom Road. Even the smallest memory could make a difference. Tips can be submitted anonymously, including by text at 443-862-9426. Quaniece Lashanda Orange was just weeks away from turning 2, a bright-eyed baby girl living in a modest apartment on Green Orchard Road in Glen, Burnie, Maryland. She should have had a lifetime ahead of her: birthday cakes, playgrounds, picture days, and first days of school. But on the morning of December 2nd, 1986, everything changed. At 6:30 a.m., her mother stepped into the bedroom and found Quaniece unresponsive. She was barely hanging on. Paramedics rushed her to the hospital. She was in a coma. Doctors tried desperately to save her, but 3 hours later, she was gone. The cause was blunt force trauma to the head, and the manner of death was determined to be homicide. And nearly 4 decades later, no one has ever been held responsible. At the time, 4 people were in that apartment: 2 adults, 1 other child, and Quaniece. That's it. So the questions still hang in the air. Who hurt her? Who stayed silent? And why has her name been allowed to fade into the background like she never mattered? The apartment was located in the 8,000 block of Green Orchard Road, part of a quiet stretch of Glen Burnie in Anne Arundel County. But here's the hard part. There's almost no public information about what happened that day. Not even basic details like Quaniece's exact date of birth. Her parents' names, not listed. No arrest reports. No follow-up articles. Just silence. But that silence tells a story, too. This wasn't a child who died in her sleep. It wasn't an accident. The medical examiner ruled her death clearly homicide, which means someone in that apartment beat her to death. They either did it or they saw it, and for nearly 40 years they've kept that truth buried. Police never released the names of the other adults in the apartment. We don't know if her father was present or even a part of her life. We don't know who the second adult was. We don't even know the age of the other child. Here's a difficult truth to consider, one that rarely gets talked about. What if it wasn't an adult? Child-on-child violence is rare, but it does happen. Very young children, toddlers, preschoolers, can and have caused serious injuries to other children, often without realizing the consequences. And when that happens, families sometimes cover it up. Not out of cruelty, but out of panic, fear, grief, love. Could that have happened here? Could someone have tried to protect another child by hiding the truth? That child would now be in their late 30s or early 40s. Have they lived all these years with a secret? Or were they witness to something even darker? Because if it wasn't a child, then it had to be an adult. So who was it? And why haven't they come forward? What's most heartbreaking is how little trace this case left behind. A baby was murdered, and the public record barely acknowledges she ever existed. If you know anything about what happened to Quaniece Lashanda Orange, anything at all, it's not too late. Even the smallest detail could matter. Call the tip line at 410-222-4700.